Your silence wasn't weakness, it was self-respect. And I need you to understand how rare that is, because most people confuse dignity with coldness, and they confuse emotional restraint with a lack of love. They think if you cared, you would fight harder, you would plead, you would explain, you would prove your pain until the other person finally takes it seriously. But that kind of fighting is often not love. It's fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of being forgotten, fear that if you stop reaching out, you stop existing in their world. And you reach that moment where you realized something that changed you, that every time you begged for clarity, you were slowly trading your self-respect for a temporary reply. There is a kind of silence that comes from giving up noticed, defeated, numb. That's not the silence we're talking about. The silence you chose was different. It was clean. It was calm. It was the silence of someone who finally stopped negotiating their worth with someone else's attention. It was the silence of someone who said, I can love you and still not chase you. It was the silence of someone who understood that if a relationship only survives when you are bleeding for it, then the relationship is not love. It's survival. And that decision to stop bleeding, to stop over-explaining, to stop trying to be understood by someone who keeps walking away mid-sentence, that decision takes a strength most people don't have. Because your heart didn't stop caring overnight. You still missed them. You still had moments where your hand reached for the phone like muscle memory. You still wanted to send the message that would fix it all, the perfect combination of softness and firmness. The perfect words that would finally make them see you, and you didn't. Not because you were trying to punish them, but because you were finally protecting yourself. You were finally admitting that your peace matters, that your sleep matters, that your nervous system matters, that your life cannot keep revolving around whether someone decides to show up today. Self-respect is not loud. It doesn't need a speech. It doesn't need a dramatic exit. It simply walks away from what keeps hurting it. And the reason your silence feels so powerful is because it refuses to participate in the old dynamic. The old dynamic was you reaching, you soothing, you repairing, you carrying the emotional weight while they stayed comfortable in distance. The old dynamic taught them that the cost of withdrawing was low because you would always close the gap. But the moment you chose silence, you raised the cost, not with threats, not with anger, not with manipulation, but with reality. The reality that you are not a resource they can tap into whenever they feel like it. The reality that you are not an endless supply of forgiveness and comfort. The reality that love is not access, and access is not guaranteed. And I know part of you worries, what if they think I don't care? But listen, if someone only believes you care when you're pleading, then they don't actually want love. They want control. Because a mature love doesn't require you to abandon your dignity to prove your feelings. A mature love respects your boundaries. A mature love hears your silence and thinks, I need to show up better, not, how dare they stop chasing me? So your silence is not a message that you stopped caring. It is a message that you stopped begging. It is you choosing to be the kind of person who can miss someone without losing themselves. That's what self-respect looks like. It looks like swallowing the urge to chase. It looks like letting the unanswered questions exist without betraying your worth. It looks like leaving without slamming the door, because you're not trying to win, you're trying to heal. And whether they regret you or not, the greatest proof of your power is this: you finally chose yourself, and that choice will change the rest of your life. Avoidants expect a chase, not a calm exit, and that expectation is not always conscious. But it is deeply wired into the pattern they've lived inside for years. They learned, somewhere along the way, that distance creates pursuit. They learned that when they pull back, someone reaches. When they go quiet, someone checks in. When they get cold, someone tries harder. And that dynamic becomes a strange kind of safety for them, because it lets them stay in control without ever having to fully show up. They don't have to risk vulnerability if they can simply trigger your attachment, because your anxiety will do the connecting for both of you, and that's why your calm exit hits differently. Not because you became heartless, not because you stopped caring, but because you removed the predictable part of the script. You didn't give them the emotional explosion they could blame. You didn't give them the long paragraph they could ignore and then call too much. You didn't give them the drama that would let them retreat and feel justified. You gave them nothing to hold against you. you simply left. And a calm exit is terrifying to someone who is used to chaos, because chaos is noise, noise is distraction, and distraction keeps them from facing the one thing they fear most, the truth of their impact. When you fight, even when you're fighting from pain, you're still showing them you're invested. You're still showing them they are the center of your emotional universe. And for an avoidant, that can feel like pressure and power at the same time. Pressure because they feel demanded of, power because they feel desired. But when you leave without fighting, you take away the power part and leave only the consequence. You don't give them the comfort of knowing you'll still be there tomorrow trying to fix it. You don't give them the reassurance that no matter what they do, your love will keep chasing them down the hallway. You make your absence real, and reality is what an avoidant cannot easily negotiate with. At first, they may tell themselves it doesn't matter. They may label you as done, or overreacting, or too sensitive, because that story protects them from vulnerability. They might even feel relief because your emotions are no longer in the room asking them to respond. But then something begins to happen. The quiet lasts. The attention doesn't return. The chase doesn't start. The script doesn't reset. And that's when they feel the unfamiliar discomfort of not being able to control the ending. Because a calm exit makes them question something they rarely question. What if I actually lost them? This is where you become the unfinished story their mind can't close. Not because you were perfect, not because you were flawless, but because you didn't give them closure through your reaction. Most people give closure by breaking down. They give closure by raging. They give closure by begging. They give closure by staying in contact, even if it's painful because contact feels like connection. But you chose silence, and silence doesn't hand them a neat ending. It doesn't allow them to say, we ended because they were dramatic, or we ended because they were needy. It forces them to sit with a harder possibility that you left because you finally saw the truth, that you left because you got tired, that you left because you realized love isn't supposed to feel like constant uncertainty. And that is why your calm exit is so powerful. It doesn't chase them, it doesn't punish them, it simply removes you from the game. It's not a tantrum, it's a boundary. And boundaries do something avoidants often aren't prepared for. They reveal consequences. They reveal that people are not infinite. They reveal that someone can love you deeply and still choose themselves. They reveal that your absence is not a threat, it's a decision. And when someone experiences that for the first time, it can trigger regret, not the dramatic kind, but the slow kind that grows in the quiet, the kind that whispers at night, maybe I misjudged them, maybe I pushed too far, maybe they were the one person who actually cared. But listen, the point isn't to make them regret you. The point is to stop living in a cycle where your love is only valued when it's chasing. Your calm exit is you stepping into a new identity, the identity of someone who doesn't beg for basic care, who doesn't audition for consistency, who doesn't confuse anxiety with connection. And whether they reach out or not, your calm exit already did its job. It saved your self-respect, it protected your heart, and it proved that your love is a gift, not a guarantee. The power of silence is that it removes access, not love. And if you've never understood that before, it's because you've been taught that love means constant availability. You've been taught that if you care, you should always reply, always explain, always fix, always keep the door cracked open, just in case they finally decide to walk through it. But silence, real silence, is not the absence of feeling. Silence is the refusal to keep giving someone the benefits of your heart while they keep giving you the instability of theirs. Because for a long time, access was the currency in your connection. They pulled away and you reached. They went quiet and you softened. They shut down and you overfunctioned. You became the peacekeeper, the translator, the one who held the relationship together with your patience. You gave favors, comfort, emotional labor, quick forgiveness, reassurance, the kind of warm presence that makes someone's life easier, even when your own heart was tired. And maybe you called it love because you meant it as love, but slowly, without realizing it, you were training them to believe they could have you without holding you. And the moment you chose silence, you didn't stop loving, you stopped supplying. You stopped giving them the cushion that protected them from the consequences of their own distance. You stopped being the soft landing for behavior that kept hurting you. That is why silence feels so sharp, not because it's cruel, but because it reveals reality. It's like turning off background music and finally hearing the truth of the room. Your silence took away their ability to reset the relationship with a casual message. It took away their ability to disappear and return to the same warmth as if nothing happened. It took away the comfort of knowing that no matter how inconsistent they were, you would stay emotionally available, ready to soothe the guilt away, ready to smooth the tension away, ready to restore access. And access is what avoidants often rely on more than they admit, not because they are evil, but because they learn to manage closeness by controlling it. They want connection in the dose that feels safe. They want your warmth when they're lonely, your softness when they're stressed, your reassurance when they doubt themselves, but they don't always want the responsibilities that come with true intimacy, the consistency, the communication, the repair. So when you remove access, you interrupt the pattern. You force the relationship to reveal whether it was built on mutual effort or on your emotional generosity. Silence also protects you from your own impulse to betray yourself. Because when you're emotionally attached, you will rationalize anything to keep the bond alive. You will accept crumbs and call it progress. You will accept vague words and call it love. You will accept a half apology and call it accountability. And silence cuts through that. Silence says, I will not keep negotiating my dignity. Silence says, I will not keep offering my heart in exchange for uncertainty. Silence says, if you want access to me, it must come with responsibility. That is not punishment, that is standards. This is why your silence doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It speaks through absence, through the missing comfort they once relied on. Suddenly, when they feel the urge to retreat, there's no guarantee you'll be waiting. Suddenly, when they feel lonely, there's no instant warmth on demand. Suddenly, when guilt flickers, there's no quick forgiveness to wash it away. And that is where growth either happens or regret begins. Because without access, they have to face themselves. They have to sit in the consequences. They have to feel the emptiness that your presence used to fill. And for you, that is where your healing starts. Because removing access is you choosing to stop pouring your energy into a place that keeps leaking it. It's you stepping out of the role of emotional caretaker. It's you reclaiming your time, your sleep, your appetite, your focus, your confidence. It's you remembering that love is not something you prove by suffering. Love is something that meets you, holds you, respects you. So when you stay silent, don't let anyone tell you you're being cold. Cold is when you don't care. You care deeply, you still do, but you finally learn the difference between love and access. And once you learn that difference, you stop giving people the privilege of your presence without the responsibility of treating you well. That is the power of silence. Regret doesn't start when you disappear. It starts when they realize you're not coming back. And that difference matters because in the beginning, an avoidant can mistake your absence for a phase. They can tell themselves you're just upset, that you'll cool off, that you'll miss them, that you'll return to the familiar role you always played, the one who reaches, the one who repairs, the one who makes it safe for them to stay emotionally half present. At first, they may even feel relief because conflict and closeness both create pressure for them, and when you're gone, the pressure is gone too. They breathe easier, they sleep, they distract themselves, they convince themselves they're fine, and for a moment they believe it. But then time passes. Not hours, not a day or two, real time. A week, 2 weeks, a month, and the silence doesn't break. Your name doesn't pop up. Your energy doesn't return. The door they assumed would stay unlocked remains closed. And that's when something shifts inside them. Because avoidants often live with an unspoken belief that people are replaceable until they aren't, that connections are optional until they become consequences. They don't always mean to be careless, but they are used to surviving by minimizing attachment, by telling themselves they don't need much, by acting like distance is normal. Yet when your absence becomes steady, it becomes undeniable, and denial is the thing they can't hide behind forever. This is when reality hits. Not romantic reality, not movie scene regret, but a slow, quiet reckoning. They start to notice the spaces you used to fill, not only emotionally, but practically. The comfort of your attention, the reassurance of your forgiveness, the warmth of your presence that made their world feel softer. They remember how you showed up, how you held them, how you made their life easier, and now they have to carry their own emotional weather without your shelter. And that is when regret begins. Not because they suddenly became the perfect partner in their mind, but because your absence exposes the cost of their behavior. At first, regret may show up as irritation. Why are they doing this? Why are they so cold? Why didn't they fight? Because it's easier to feel angry than to feel loss. Anger protects them from vulnerability. Anger lets them tell a story where you are the problem. But if you stay gone, if you don't give them a reaction to feed on, that anger has nowhere to land. And underneath it is the feeling they were trying to avoid, the fear that they pushed too far, the fear that their withdrawal didn't create pursuit this time, it created an ending. And that's when the mind starts replaying the past in a different order. The moments that once felt too much start to look like care. The boundaries you tried to set start to look like self-respect. The softness they once took for granted starts to feel rare. They start to wonder if they misjudged you, if they underestimated your strength, if they assumed you would always be there because you loved them. And that's the cruel irony. They confuse your love with permanence, and permanence makes them careless. But the moment permanence breaks, they wake up. Regret also grows when they realize they lost more than a person. They lost an identity. They lost the identity of being desired without having to earn it. They lost the comfort of knowing someone would always reach out first. They lost the certainty that they could withdraw without consequences. And those losses are painful because they reveal something they don't want to admit, that your presence mattered more than they allowed themselves to acknowledge. They didn't just lose the relationship, they lost the safety net of your devotion. But here is what matters for you. Regret is not your responsibility. Their realization is not your job to manage. Your silence was not a strategy, it was a boundary. And boundaries don't exist to educate someone, they exist to protect you. If regret comes, it comes because they finally saw the truth they kept avoiding. And if it never comes, your silence still saved you, because you stopped waiting for someone to value you the way you already deserve to be valued. Regret starts when they realize you're not coming back, but your healing starts the moment you stop measuring your worth by whether they do. The real win is what you become in the quiet, because silence is not just something that happens between two people. It becomes a room you have to live in, and the question is, will you make that room a prison, or will you make it a sanctuary? For so long, your attention was pulled outward, toward their moods, their replies, their distance, their sudden warmth, their sudden coldness, and your nervous system became trained to chase clarity like it was oxygen. You learned to scan for signs, to interpret silence like danger, to treat every delay as a story about your worth. And then you walked away and the noise stopped, and suddenly you were left with yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, and the raw truth of what you have been tolerating. That is why the quiet feels heavy, because it doesn't distract you, it reveals you. At first, the quiet can feel like grief. Not only grief for them, but grief for the version of you that kept hoping. The you that believed if you loved hard enough, stayed patient enough, explained gently enough, you could turn inconsistency into commitment. The quiet forces you to see how much effort you were spending to keep a connection alive that kept pulling away from you. And it hurts because you realize you weren't just trying to build love, you were trying to earn safety, and you were paying for it with your dignity. So the first stage of becoming is honesty. Honest about the ways you abandoned yourself. Honest about the excuses you made. Honest about how you confused potential with reality. Honest about how often you accepted crumbs and called it progress because you were afraid of starting over. Then something begins to shift, if you let it. Your nervous system starts to settle, not immediately, not perfectly, but gradually. You start to sleep without checking your phone. You start to eat without the knot in your stomach. You start to breathe without waiting for a message to make the day feel okay. And you begin to feel your power return, not the loud power of revenge, but the quiet power of self-respect. You start to remember that you are a whole person, not a person on standby. You start to remember the parts of your life that got neglected while you were busy managing the uncertainty. Your friends, your goals, your routines, your confidence, your joy. The quiet gives those things back to you if you claim them. This is where the real win happens, because becoming in the quiet changes what you will accept if they ever return. Before, you might have responded from hunger. One message from them could have erased weeks of pain because you craved relief more than you craved truth. You would have opened the door too fast, forgiven too quickly, asked for too little, just to keep them from leaving again. But when you become in the quiet, you don't respond from hunger, you respond from standards. You are still kind, but you are not available to confusion. You are open, but you are not open-ended. You can miss them and still require consistency. You can care and still demand clarity. You stop calling bare minimum effort love because you finally understand that love is not the return, love is the repair. And if they do come back, your becoming will test them, not with games, but with reality. Because you won't be impressed by breadcrumbs anymore. You won't be hypnotized by a sudden burst of attention. You will look for the thing that matters: behavior, accountability, consistency. A willingness to talk about what happened without minimizing it, without flipping it onto you, without disappearing the moment intimacy gets real. You will be able to say calmly, "I'm willing to reconnect, but I need stability," and you will mean it. That is power, not because it controls them, but because it honors you. And if they don't come back, your becoming still wins, because you will not be the same person who begged. You will not be the same person who waited. You will not be the same person who thought love meant tolerating anxiety. You will become someone who knows that silence is not a punishment, it is a reset, and in that reset, you rebuilt yourself, you rebuilt your boundaries, you rebuilt your self-trust, you rebuilt the part of you that once believed you had to fight for love. The real win is what you become in the quiet, because when you become stronger, you don't just lose someone who couldn't meet you, you gain yourself back, and that is the kind of victory that changes everything.